We're recording. This is it.
We're doing it.
We're recording this week's. Well, I say
Hello,
this
John.
week's.
You're
Is it this
breaking
week's
up, and I'm
podcast?
breaking up. Are we
Wait.
both? Hello.
Are we?
No,
Oh.
I've never done this before, John.
What podcast?
Yeah,
Online?
it's
Oh,
just a podcast.
We'll say we're remote this week, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like
Sorry.
people will know.
I'm yawny. I apologize.
Sleepy.
I have busy day, busy week, busy, just
Monster
busy everything. I'm
Energy
busy all of the
sponsor
time.
the podcast.
Oh, please, I'm begging. Hey guys,
Welcome back to Real Talk.
My
I gotta get back
God.
behind from the mic, so
We've done it. We've done it.
blow it out.
I said we've done it. We did miss a week.
We've never missed a week.
We've
John.
actually, you're so right. We've actually never missed a week.
We have never done it.
We've never missed anything.
I was explaining to John literally before we started recording that I've been all like messed up because it feels like the weeks are going too fast, that like by the time we message each other, I'm like, oh fuck, it's Sunday and we haven't recorded the podcast this week. So we've been testing, or we at least are testing, the thought of a couple of remote episodes every now and then, because otherwise John comes to my place and sometimes we don't have time to be like meeting up, but we always have time to talk to a friend on the internet. So
And you guys are
Yeah.
also friends. So
we are all friends.
we're
We're all friends. You
we
guys
are.
listening, you're our friends.
We want to be able to make these as much as we can. We set out with the premise to do it weekly. Is that still possible? Definitely. Should we probably attempt to do that more? Yes, but we may have to sprinkle in some remote ones. So if the audio sounds a bit different today, that's why. It probably, to be honest with you, sounds a bit better than it normally does, because
Yeah, I was
we
going
haven't
to say,
spent
at least
spent
for
20
this, it won't be 10 minutes of not being able to hear me except
Yeah.
for through your mic.
Yeah,
I was listening to I was listening to the
weird,
last 10 minutes of it the other day, and I was like, you could just hear me like from the other side of the room, just yes, yes, Alexander the Great.
Woo!
And
It was great.
And then it was just like, okay, like every 2 seconds, just like a clicking noise, and I was like, oh, this sucks.
It is what it is. We're doing a remote one this week. Will it be remote next week? Who knows? It doesn't matter. I just thought we'd let you know. So if we talk about it all or point at things, I don't have a map in front of me directly, but I have sent Jack a map, and we are looking at it together at the same time.
I have the stick in my hand that John uses. I'm going to be pointing at my screen, and it's just going to feel the same. Everything's going to be the same.
So real talk. Welcome back, everyone. So we are a comedy history podcast. However, this is a massive disclaimer here. We are going to be talking about something that's very current this week. We are going to be talking about the history of it, of course, but it's very current. It's very fresh. It's very raw, and it's happening right now. It's also extremely confronting. Many of the things that we may talk about. It's pretty full on. If you in any way do not want to listen to or talk about, or you have very specific views that you think we might not share on the current state of the Palestinian region when it comes to the conflict there, and the facts and the current workings on that, then this might not be the one for you. We aren't always going to talk about current situations. Normally we don't, is just because normally the reason we don't is because obviously it's still an ongoing thing. There are going to be things that are blown out of proportion. There are going to be things that are understated and not talked about properly. And there are going to be things that are lied about and made up on their end. I'm not saying that we're going to be saying that, but we are going to be talking about things that may not be 150% true in a few years when it's investigated, or when the conflict hopefully is subsided and the death and losses has been removed. So we're putting that premise in now. Normally, we are, joking around, messing about. If there is anything in this podcast that confronts you a bit much or is too much, Obviously, we're not going to be upset if you let us know, or if there is if you click off, or if you don't want to listen. So we just
I
wanted to put that
think,
out there first.
yeah, we absolutely like to have more of a history rather than current like shit going on, so then we can laugh and joke about it. Like, obviously, stuff that has happened in the past, like history stuff, is also not always worth like joking about or whatever. But especially something like this that's so serious is like and so current. Yeah, we want to make sure that we are as serious about it when we're talking about it and stuff like that. And so it's always like history first and and like learning first. So me specifically, no jokes here. No jokes from this guy. I'm strictly learning, no spitballs. Where I'm gonna be paying attention. I'm gonna be good this time. So
All right.
anyway, John, what are we learning about?
Well, today we're going to be talking about Israel, Palestine, the area around the River Jordan, that kind of region. We're going to be talking about its history a little bit about how it is now, and we are probably going to discuss, obviously, inevitably, by talking about this, the current situation there. So, I'm just going to outwardly say I have pretty strong feelings about this topic. There's a lot of things I read that make me very upset. Me and Jack, kind of crazy. We were talking about it before the podcast. The on October 7th, the day the attack started happening, me and Jack were reading the we were watching some of the videos and the stories and stuff, like, together on the day it started. And we saw like clips of the things that were happening in the region around Gaza. You see the Hamas attack on Israel and stuff, and it was kind of crazy. It was
very
really crazy.
eye-opening.
Yeah,
like, I think we'd previously mentioned that we wanted to make like a history comedy podcast or whatever, because I know that John loves history, loves teaching and stuff like that. But especially after seeing something like this, I was like, my views as somebody who does not like pay much attention to like political things, historical things, or whatever, like current things going on, I feel like I could so easily be persuaded to believe the wrong thing, as like, because random shit is going up all the time. Like John mentioned, all of this stuff that we're talking about could end up changing because it's a current thing. So it's, I was like talking to John when we were looking at all of it as it was all going down, and I was basically like, you're going to need to teach me about this stuff, because I can't just trust everything that I'm like seeing on the internet or whatever. So it was this specifically was a very important piece that made me be like, okay, we need to do a history, somewhat educational like podcast for something like this as well. Just sprinkling in these current events and stuff like that. So
that was all of the kind of stuff we just wanted to point out before we started. But let's start like at the history side of things, as we do here on Real Talk, as we are a history comedy podcast. We do like to teach. I am going to university to become a history teacher, and Jack wants to learn. Jack loves learning. He's like, yes,
learning.
I
feel bad for not learning enough when I was in school.
Yeah.
I just didn't pay attention enough, and I was like, I need to redeem myself,
He's
because
like,
I'm now an adult. So.
In my 20s, I will learn.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm happy to do that. And all you guys can learn along at home. Now, if you are listening on Spotify, make sure if you do enjoy the podcast, you rate it 5 stars, because Jack, what do we say? If you rate us 5 stars, what happens?
It gets us up on the
It
charts
does,
for
and
history comedy.
higher on the charts means more podcasts for you guys and more people that get to listen to it. So if you do think
Yes.
we're doing the right thing, make sure you do that. If you're listening on YouTube, on that rare occasion, if you are, make sure you just drop a like, comment, that kind of thing, share it around. Bit of interaction, it always helps what we're doing. All right, so wow, the area of Palestine, eh? What an
Mm.
interesting little space this is. Um, we should probably start like at the start. So Palestine is a region that's always been like occupied by someone or something. It's never really properly existed as its own space. For a long time, it was occupied by like ancient Egypt back in the Egyptian Empire and stuff, way back when, pyramids and that.
Pyramids and that.
Pyramids and that. And then it was Rome, and then the Byzantines, and then the Umayyad Caliphates when Islam became a large religion in that region. The caliphates and stuff. And then obviously the various like Ottoman empires and Mamelukes and like from Egypt and stuff. It's always been like an occupied region. Obviously, eventually, the colonial powers of Britain and France and things like that came in and occupied it and stuff. So it's always been an occupied region. It's never really been its own state. Now in this region, there's always been an existent mix of groups. There's always been like large amounts of Christians and there's been large amounts of like Muslims, Jewish people, as well as like Coptic, like kind of Central African
Oh.
Christianity and stuff is really like quite important there. That kind of thing. There's like a real mix of places. The Orthodox Church find it really important. That kind of thing. So it's a very important area of the world to a lot of religions and culture.
Mhm.
That's obviously shown in things like countless conflicts have also been fought over this region. For instance, like the easiest one to mention is the Crusades. It was all about this region. The Crusades were constantly called on the region of Israel, Palestine. They wanted Jerusalem and things like that. So it's an important area and it's always been fought over, but never really has it had its own long-lasting sovereignty of its own thing. The people who live in the geographical region of Palestine, because that's what this is. It is a geographical region. It is then a culture, and it's difficult to when I say Palestine, I may not mean the current state of the nation of
Yeah,
Palestine.
right.
I may be referencing the actual geographical region that is Palestine, which is that region.
Mhm.
So Palestine itself has a culture. It obviously was probably before the state of Israel a largely Islamic region, especially in its later time, just before it was colonized by the British. I say colonized, invaded by the British. It was controlled by the Muslim Ottoman Empire for a very long time. So it's before that it was like the caliphs and stuff back in the medieval age, and then there were the Crusades, and there's always been it's predominantly, and I'm pretty confident in this, an Islamic region. So the region of Palestine is predominantly Palestinian by culture and Islamic by religion. That was before the placement of the Israeli state. So I'm pretty confident with that, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna go with that. Feel free to scream at me angrily in on Twitter if you want to. Um, so that was like, yeah, it's always been occupied. However, coming up to the end of World War II, the region of what was it called? Mandatory Palestine. It was called Mandatory Palestine. Very strange little name. You see,
I
I
was
had
gonna
a
say you said that literally right before we started the
yeah.
podcast
So
as well, didn't you? I was like, I was pissed
Mandatory
off.
Palestine. Weird little name for a state. It was created out of like pretty much the British and the UN were like, so let's make an ethno state here, or like let's make a state here for the Jewish people in 1910.
Mhm.
So from about 1910 to 1915, they were like, we need a state for they were began the plans to build a state for the Jewish people in that region. Obviously, Jerusalem is a important area for the Jewish
Mhm.
people, so they were like, we'll build a state here. Um, that from 1910 to 1914 was what was called Mandatory Palestine, and they had a quota that they needed to hit for like how many Jewish people were to be moved to this region, or like
Oh,
paid to move to that region and that kind of thing, right? Um, so that was like a mandatory kind of move here. Here's like the reason you should. We're building this for you, that kind of thing, right? Um, so that kind of like it happens, but it's not like super prevalent. Obviously, there's quite a lot going on in this time period. There's the Roaring Twenties, and then there's the Great Depression when like all the banks crash, and so like a lot changed.
wait, I actually thought when you said the Roaring Twenties, I was just thinking of the meme of like Raw XD Roaring Twenties.
Oh no,
I,
not
I
not
didn't. I
no
was gonna say. I was like, "What? What did you just say?" But I
no
was. I was literally just thinking of the ironic Roaring Twenties.
no. So yeah, so around like the 1800s, 99.7% of the world's Jewish population lived outside of the region that is now Israel. So very few Jewish people actually lived there.
Right.
And now it contains approximately about 43 to 45% of the world's Jewish population.
Oh shit.
So it's an almost like 45-50% increase of Jewish population in that region.
Hmm.
Um, it's a huge concentration of people. Um, the creation of this state kind of like died down during the Great Depression because obviously funding gone, focusing on internal government, that kind of thing. Anyway, of course, World War II happens. The Holocaust. Um, we will cover that eventually, but obviously, if you don't know what the Holocaust is, um, you live under a rock.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was like, "What? What do we
Have
say
you ever
about?"
opened a history book? The systematic extermination of the Jewish people by the Nazi government controlling Germany during the 30s and 40s is the easiest way to word it.
Hmm.
Um, and so following that, obviously the UN kickstarted the creation of a Jewish state again because they were like, holy shit, should probably do something about this.
Mm.
So they did this. They created what is now the Israeli state in mandatory. Well, they didn't create the Israeli state. That's a lie. They moved them to mandatory Palestine. At the
Hmm.
time, it was like kind of split. So there was like drawn lines, but there wasn't like exact like this is what we want it to be.
Right.
It was like a mixed thing. Um, but but the eventually they led an uprising against the I say led an uprising, that's a lie. When the British kind of handed this region over to the UN around the same year, that was when the Israelis put in a declaration of independence in 1948. So in
Uh-huh.
1948. So Israel declared itself its own state. The British endorsed Zionism, as in obviously the state of is a Jewish state, Zionism. They created this, and they were like, okay, we're going to now partition sections of Israel or Palestine into Israel and Palestine.
So does that just kind of mean like breaking it up essentially and just being like,
Yeah,
you guys are here, you guys are here?
they were like, here's the lines that we've drawn.
Right.
Here's the state that you should do. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, so the the Arabian people who lived in the region at the time, the people of Palestine, were very unhappy with everything that's going on here. The idea that the British invaded their land and then were started to draw up this new state, and they were like, "We're going to move all these people here who weren't here, and you don't get a choice, and you now have to move to these sections of the land that you live in."
Mm.
They weren't happy with that. So from like 1935, 6-ish to about 1940, there was consistent Arabian revolts, consistent Palestinian revolts against the British government. A lot of violence, a lot of killing in that region. They were not happy at all with it. They really didn't want it. Of course, because it's a foreign invader setting up a foreign
Yeah.
state in their land. You
I
know,
was
they
like, surely it's not controversial of me to say
no,
like, yeah, I get why the
yeah,
Palestinians are angry.
you
Like,
would be really upset about that.
yeah.
So roughly, they cut up Palestine. The UN were like the British handed it over to the UN. The British were like, okay, you deal with this because
Mm-hmm.
obviously now like a great united like world kind of like thing. It's like, oh, this is a good plan. We'll cut it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Palestine was going to be an independent state, and then Israel was going to be an independent state. Israel got about 56% of the region, which was about 82% of the Jewish population that was in that region at the time. Um, but it was going to be like separated up, similar to how the West Bank and Gaza are now.
Right.
Um, Similar to how the West Bank and Gaza are now,
Mm-hmm.
where they're separated. When the initial plan for Israel was written up, the state of Israel was actually going to be the one that was going to be split in half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but eventually, it was accepted by most of the Jewish people, and then it was rejected by most of the Arabian people too. However, there's anything we do know about this region, they don't really give a shit about
Yeah.
what the Arabian people who lived in the region care about. Um, so a bunch of Arab countries were planning to reject it and like that kind of thing. But it was denied. It was like vetoed, and then it was put forward. The borders were written, and that was that. That was yeah. So the Jerusalem, or sorry, Israel wrote up its Declaration of Independence, and there it was. It was done. That was
So that happened in 1948.
48.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I guess I understand now, like, because I was saying to you, I was like, or I think I even said it earlier in this episode where I was like the whole thing that I saw was like all of a sudden Israel Palestine, like there was a war going on, and
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know where that came from or whatever, but now I guess it is making sense on why there is like so much conflict going on, because yeah, from how I just heard it is like suddenly a bunch of like basically the people that lived in Palestine were like, "Hey, there are people coming in, so you guys gotta skedaddle," kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Well, shit, now what?" And then for what, uh, like 80 years or so. Um, I can't do math, but
Roughly.
is that yeah, around about yeah. I was gonna say I just had to guess a number because
Mm.
I could have just said less than 100 years, but that seems like I'm downplaying it.
So following the Israel's Declaration of Independence, a large like Arab League came together to aid the people of Palestine.
Mhm.
They were wanting to march in and occupy sections of this land and be like, this is Palestine. This isn't some country you're making up. This isn't
Yeah,
a
right.
place where you can move people into. This is a place where Arabs live. This is a place where Islamic people live. This is a place where these people come from. These people live here. You've occupied it and you're building a state here that wasn't here before. And so this conflict broke out in the same year that Israel and Palestine were like drawn up by the UN. So this happened. So there was a war. It led to like a couple of thousand. That's a lie. 15,000 casualties on both sides.
Mm.
There was a ceasefire. However, the ceasefire took the Israeli land from what it was to what we now see Israel as, which is the splitting of the West Bank and Gaza.
Right.
Israel took that land in that war. So that original drawn up one where it was like the one we looked at before. For anyone at home, by the way, if you want to look up just the Israeli Declaration of Independence, and you can, I don't know, Wikipedia or Google Images, it shows you the Palestinian UN partition plan. So Israel went from, I'm showing Jack now, so if you look at this image, you'll know what I mean. So the orange is what Israel was, and the yellow is what Palestine was at the drawing of this plan. Following the quote-unquote victory for Israel, they became the white here.
Yeah,
and
right.
then so Israel, it kind of went from a 50-something% ownership to more like an 80.
Yeah.
Because they won this conflict against the Arab League. And occupied further land from it. And of course, as now both states were independent, the UN and the British can't really do anything. So they just let it be.
Okay.
Because obviously this was following the independence from both countries.
Yeah,
the
right.
UN drew up the lines, were like, there you go, you're independent, and just stepped away.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were like, and stepped away, and then the conflict happened, and then Israel occupied more land following the initial conflict right at the start in 1949, so a year after So
and it was because that they had suddenly become independent that they were like, okay, we're not on anyone's team, essentially.
Yeah, so that it was like what they did is they put two rabid dogs in a pit, all right?
Yeah,
and then so this is an awful way. This is an awful way to think of it. How do I put this? To this big big group were like, okay, here's the borders. 52-48% split. There you go for it. The same year they gave them independence, they just step away and let them fight. And they were like, you deal with it yourself.
Oh, that's so annoying.
It's horrible, isn't it? It's like, deal with it yourself. You can do it.
Israel, after they already weren't very happy with each other anyway.
Yeah. So
and they're like, okay, now we have no.
You can't draw up these like people aren't dumb. You couldn't have drawn up these borders, seen the rejection from many Arab people in the Palestinian government, in the surrounding countries, and not think they were instantly going to start fighting each other the moment you stepped away. But they did. 15,000 people died, and Israel became what it is now currently state-wise, excluding the Golan Heights, which was taken from Syria during a following war, which we're just about to talk about. This is quite a large one. This is the one when I've thought before the current conflict, when I thought of Israeli conflict, this is the one I think about.
Is it the 6-Day War?
It is the 6-Day War. Before that, there was a Suez Crisis where Egypt and Jordan, with Palestinian militants, attempted to attack within Israel, similar to what happened recently. Just like other people funded militants attacking into Israel from Gaza, because Gaza wasn't completely part of Palestine. It was sort of semi-military occupied by Egypt at this point.
Oh,
so it was part of Palestine,
Yeah.
But it was like separated, obviously, from the West Bank, which is where like the another section up here is of Palestine. So it's
Yeah.
separated. So Egypt have like military occupied it to like quote unquote keep it safe, you know. So they did this. There was the Suez Crisis, where the what is this? The Suez Crisis referred to the try. Oh yes, the the bit rough. The British and the French re-invaded Egypt in the
Oh man.
50s, which is kind of fucked up. And then the British reoccupied Egypt and were like, haha, this is ours again.
So then they really weren't going to be helping.
Yeah, so they really weren't able to help anything. Israel hosted a lot of like forces for the British and the French to help attack into Egypt. And the Palestinians and Egyptians and Jordan military fought back into Israel. So it was like a proxy war. Israel were like, okay, we'll help Winky, you know, that kind of thing. The Israelis occupied a lot of land. Eventually withdrew, but it caused a lot of problems because the Gaza Strip was then put under further Egyptian military administration. Because they were worried that Israel were just going to occupy it
and then just leave,
and then just leave. Right? Yeah, exactly. So, a bit of a mess. However, in the 60s, they kind of like let it go and gave it back to Palestine, and this was really when like the Palestinian like liberation thing came around the 60s. This was when like Palestine was like, okay, we're not so much on the back foot anymore. We have sort of support from the people around us. Let's do this, you know. Let's see what we can do. Let's start thinking about attempting to take our home back.
Right.
Because obviously at this point they are occupied, I'd say. It was like, if we're talking like super like UN focused, when the UN originally drew those lines, Israel is occupying sections of that land. You know, so it's there is illegal land ownership currently, if we're talking UN wise, and we're talking like drawn land originally wise. The people of Palestine were invaded and displaced already back in 48. In around the 60s was around the time that they were like, okay, we need to start seeing what we can do here. We've got support of many people in the Arab League, which were like Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, that kind of thing, all the surrounding Arab countries. They were like, what can we do here? So that was around the time where that kind of thing had come around.
Right.
Now, the 6-Day War, this was the one that I always think about. It took place in the late 60s, so around the same time as like, you know, Vietnam and all that kind of thing, when the whole world was proxy warring each other and no one was actually fighting.
I feel like, was the world just on fire at that point?
Well, no, it was the Cold War, Jack. Remember, it was the Cold War. It never was on fire. It was just like cooking a bit, you know. It was somebody cooked here, you know.
I set you up for that. I set you up for a slam dunk.
You sure did, buddy.
You sure did. Historical slam dunk.
So this is a sticky one because now, obviously, anyone following along at home, feel free to Google 6-Day War. Should show you a similar map to what we're looking at now. Israel in the blue. Anything that's kind of highlighted green or orange is land owned by the Arab League, were the ones who were attacked by Israel. Now, this conflict, a bit sticky, because I kind of do understand the backfighting, like why they fought it, but it was like, probably shouldn't have done it. So the region underneath, there's like there we go, the Straits of Tehran, that's what I was trying to think of. So the
Hmm.
Straits of Tiran, it is the section behind the Suez. So the Mediterranean Sea, obviously Israel borders a lot of the Mediterranean Sea, and it has a tiny little port that borders the Red Sea, and that
Hmm.
needs to go through the Straits of Tiran. Now to do that, um, ships need to pass right next to Egyptian controlled land.
Hmm.
Um, Now the Egyptians stopped Israeli shipping being allowed through that, um, so that they could go through the Suez instead. Now the Israelis didn't like that. Uh, they threatened large amounts of. They threatened war. They were like,
Hmm.
you can't do that. And
The Egyptians did?
no, the Israelis were like, Egypt, you can't do that. And
Oh,
Egypt
okay,
were
yeah.
like,
You're right.
but we just did. So the Israelis were threatening war. They asked them to not do it, and then they didn't back down. So Israel invaded them. They fought all of the Arab League, so Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, I think, and Palestine, of course.
Hmm.
They occupied all of Palestine. That includes the West Bank and Gaza. They
Oh
took all
shit.
of the Sinai region, which is the region between Israel and the Suez Canal, which is right here. This
Hmm.
is the canal that allows shipping through here.
Right.
Um, and then they occupied the Golan Heights, which is this region up here. So before I was talking about how
Yeah.
Israel didn't own the Golan Heights yet, they took
Yep.
this off Syria in this war, and that's still owned by Israel now.
Ah.
So it's called the Golan Heights, and it's a region north of Israel. It's a very important military area. It gives them like a lot of control over that southern Syrian region. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Oh,
that
I see.
happened. That's so they took a lot of land off them. So eventually they were told to retreat back. Can't control all of this land. Um, but Israel kept some of it. They took, as I said, the Golan Heights. They took sections of the West Bank, and this was around the time that they militarily occupied the Gaza Strip for the first time, um, since it's like land was there, you know.
Hmm. Yep.
Um, so there was the Yom Kippur War, where Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack against Israel, attempting to retake sections of the land. Egypt tried to retake a bunch of the Sinai region, which was obviously this big green one here, because Israel was
Right.
still holding on to it at this point. They hadn't pulled out yet.
Oh. So
Um,
Israel had all of the Sinai
yes, they
region.
had all of this. They were very
Wow.
large. Yeah, very big. Um, Egypt were like, we want this back because they wanted control of both sides of the Suez.
Uh-huh.
Because holding only one side is really dangerous.
Yeah, right.
So they were like, we want this side back, hopefully most of the Sinai, and then obviously Syria wanted the Golan Heights back.
So a
Um,
quick question,
yeah.
like basically just in general, my thought has been like, how does it even work when a a country is planning to like invade another country? Because from how I thought it was like you probably couldn't just be like, I am sending all of my people into here to take everything, because I feel like I guess the way that my brain is thinking of it is it's like, do they say to the people that own this country, like, we are taking this and like fight back or whatever? Or do they literally just march in there?
Um, Before, especially these kind of conflicts, generally like armies will already be posted on borders and stuff.
Uh huh.
These states and these regions have standing armies, which means they have military people who are in these bases at all times. They're in these regions, they're ready to go at all times, you know.
Right.
So these kind of conflicts they do just occur, or they did occur, and there was like preemptiveness, especially to the initial 6 Day War when they were like, "We're going to attack you, Egypt, if you don't stop this." You know, so
Yeah.
that was
Okay.
around the time the Yom Kippur War, which was the kind of counterattack by
Hmm.
the Arab League, which unfortunately they did lose quite significantly.
Right.
Um, the
That was a surprise attack.
That was a surprise attack.
Yeah.
However, because Israel were already occupying this land, they already had military people in these regions. So
Uh-huh.
it's not like where Australia is like an island, you know what I mean? So we
Yeah.
don't need a standing
And
army on our entire border.
I
But for
think that's where
instance,
I'm kind of confused about it because yeah,
yeah.
literally where we live, we haven't like had that thing of just being able to go to another country without getting on a plane or something.
Yeah, but in countries like, for instance, like India and Pakistan are a classic. Two bordered countries that have conflicts, like semi, you know, they do fuck with each other often.
Mhm.
They have a standing army, right? Both countries have a standing army,
Yeah.
and so they just put them on that border because it's like,
Yeah,
where
right.
else are they going to be, right? So
Yeah.
the countries that are land based, not like individual islands, will always generally have military posts along the borders of their neighbors.
Okay.
So yeah, obviously, there are those there. So that's why like these kind of conflicts do occur, because it's not just like, oh, we're invading you now. Hello,
Yeah.
everyone's
It's
here.
yeah,
Surprise.
right.
You know, there's always like it's
The
coming, or they're
yeah, like the
prepared.
tension, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's the tension that builds up to it. And there's always like something. And
Yeah, okay.
also like, again, we're still in the Cold War, so things like, you know, huge spy networks and things like that, like it's likely that there was information coming that they were already coming anyway.
Yeah, okay.
You know, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I
it's
guess that's
like,
just been like a way of like that I haven't been able to like grasp is like
mm,
because I know that like I understand that you know like the leaders of countries like will talk to each other about shit, but then it's like how do they talk to each other and then be like, "Oh, I am going to invade your country." Like
yeah.
I don't know, I just felt weird in my brain, but yeah, no, that makes sense now.
So moving on from the Yom Kippur War, um, Israel still owns a lot of this land, by the way. Not
Mhm.
currently, but it's still like, if we're talking in this situation, they're still here. In the 70s, Lebanon had a civil war. Palestinian militants were attacking Israel. Lebanese militants were attacking Israel. It was like a little poking in, like shooting and stuff.
Right.
Um, However, um, there was a massacre of so Palestinian militants took uh a over like I think it was it a bus? Yeah, it was a bus.
Yeah.
They took a bus and then they killed a bunch of Israeli people in it. And Israel were like, they can't. That's not super cool.
Yeah.
So they invaded southern Lebanon completely, which is we haven't really talked about Lebanon much yet. Let me see if I can let me pull up a map. They're up
Jamie,
here.
can you pull that up?
This is up. They're up here.
Oh, okay, yep.
Lebanon. So northern Israel. We're in northern Israel.
Yeah.
So that happened. They quickly withdrew afterwards. They kind of went in, killed some bad men, ran away. Happened again. Attacks continued against Israel. So Israel, as I said before, standing army, always have people on the borders of people around them.
Yeah.
So there was like attacks on their armed forces constantly, like through the 80s and stuff. Lebanon war happened again. Israel once again invaded. Palestinian militants were attempting to attack them from like Beirut and stuff, which is a section in like the West Bank. So, like up here, there was loads of fighting, and then here there was loads of fighting. Not the
Mhm.
West Bank, sorry. Beirut is not in the West Bank, but they captured Beirut and things like that, and it was just such a fucking mess. It was a massive mess.
Yeah.
Loads of fighting. The 80s was they fought a lot in like the northern part of Israel rather than the southern, which is where we're talking about now.
Right.
We're getting a little closer to now, getting a little closer to our time. Um, so Israel and peace, Israel and Palestine around this area, were beginning to sign like peace treaties and stuff. Israel and Egypt signed a peace deal finally in '82. So the Oslo Accords were written up, which was, I think, when... Yeah, that's when the Palestinian people, or the Palestinian government, was actually put in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So this was when Palestine became its own country again.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, okay, yeah.
Israel up until this point had still occupied the West Bank and Gaza.
Right, yeah.
But now after the peace deals, it was like, okay, they can come back. Palestine has its own country and stuff. So Hamas was around this time. This was when they started becoming like a political figureheads, started becoming more militaristic, that kind of thing. There was a lot of attacks against Israelis by Hamas. It really it fucked up the peace process, apparently. Who would have guessed? What the Okay, so the Palestinians re-rise up in 2000, September 2000. So similar to what we are seeing now, this was like when Palestine rose up against Israel and were like, we want our country back. I'm showing Jack right now. This kid here,
yeah,
he threw a stone at a tank and got shot and killed for it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was just looking at that
Yeah,
photo.
yeah. He threw a rock at a tank and they killed him for it, which is kind of fucked up. This was a suicide bombing in Tel Aviv. So let's have a look here. What happened in 2000? Massive conflict between the Palestinian National Security Forces and the Israeli Defense Forces. So, in 2005, the Israeli prime minister, ordered the removal of all Israeli settlers and soldiers from Gaza. So, all Israeli people were removed from Gaza in 2005. That was the official end of the occupation of Gaza. So, this was when Gaza became a free Palestinian area. Finally.
It only took how many years?
60 years.
Yeah.
Well, if we're talking historically, like thousands.
Yeah. Well, politically, I guess.
Yeah, politically, if we're talking like in its current state, 60 years. Historically, thousands of years. So this was around the time that they like got quote unquote released by Israel. However, the United Nations and the Human Rights Watch were still like, but you still control the airspace, the waters around it, the way they get food and anything like that. Like, yeah, sure, Israel weren't in Gaza, but they still had a chokehold on Gaza.
Yeah.
So around 2006, this was when Hamas won the parliamentary election. Israel instantly responded with economic sanctions. So they were like, Hamas are not in charge, and if they are in charge, we're not giving you anything trade-wise. So you have to get it all from someone else.
Right. And how were they going to get trade stuff from someone else?
Hopefully, their nice friends around helped them, but there was also a naval blockade in this time, so
yeah,
they couldn't get anything in. There was like a small little civil conflict on the inside of Gaza, which was when Hamas and Fatah fought, which were like two opposition-y forces within Palestine at the time. Palestine attempted to gain UN membership as a sovereign state, and that was not passed. So Hamas responded quite angrily. They began firing rockets into Israel. And then Israel responded by bombing Gaza. So this was all in 2011 and 2012. So that resulted in 2,000 dead Palestinians and 70 dead Israelis. Now, that was the last conflict before now. And this is this is where we are now. So
Mm.
that's like really briefly hovering over the general conflicts that have taken place in that area. As you can tell, it's never really stopped.
Yeah, I was gonna
It's
say, and
always
also
been
like at what has been mentioned in pretty much every single episode so far has been I cannot cover all of this in one episode.
mm,
So
yeah, so it's a mess. It's always been a problem.
mhm.
There's always been conflict. It's endless. This conflict really is just endless. Um,
Which now what is good is that I understand where the conflict has come from now.
yeah.
Because I, on my own accord, would not look into this.
Mm.
Like, I would just see the stuff that is currently happening and be like, okay, anyway. But like, with this podcast, it is making me literally read through the, and like listen through the reason why this stuff is happening. So, did you want to, how, where are we at, by the way? How far are we?
We are now. That was it. We are now.
Okay,
We
and
are
how
where
long
we
have
are
we
now.
been going for?
Oh, 50 minutes. We got time.
Oh, okay, cool. We got time.
So we are going to talk about now.
Mhm.
Are you okay with this?
I'm ready.
Okay. So for all the people who are now listening, this is around the point that we're going to be talking about now. I am going to share my own opinions on it. Jack may share his. So if this is the part where you just didn't want to listen to like the history bit and you're okay listening to us, cool, stick around. If you're not, all good. I hope you enjoyed what we've been talking about so far. Anyway, pre-warned. So Israel Palestine, Israel's invasion of the Gaza Strip. First off, holy shit, awful. Like an atrocious loss of life, a horrific flexing almost of power, an atrocious use of force into the regions of Gaza. It's awful. A lot of people aren't talking about the West Bank, which is fair enough, which is the other section of Palestine.
I just saw that you brought up a photo of it, and
Yeah,
I was like, I didn't even think about West Bank
I
because
was reading about it. There isn't. I mean, there isn't like an official invasion conflict currently. Of the picture we're looking at, Jack, the red bit is owned by Palestine, and the blue bit is owned by Israel. This again is an illegal occupation. This is land that is Palestinian and it is occupied by Israel. All of the checkpoints out of this region are locked. You can't leave, and no one's allowed in. And there are apparently widespread conflicts between Palestinian settlers and Israeli settlers in this region currently. So, not a lot of people are talking about it, but it is still happening. It is still awful. The area around Jerusalem. So Jerusalem for a long time was split between the nation of Palestine and Israel, as it always was really meant to be. However, since then, Israel have fully occupied Jerusalem, and that was pretty recently. So this is a fully annexed region of Jerusalem, because they didn't want to share it with Palestine. There's also been conflict on the Lebanese border. I don't know if you've heard about that. Hezbollah.
don't think so.
Hezbollah are like similar to Hamas, but in Lebanon.
Right.
They're not part of the government though. They are technically like a radical group. But they've been having conflicts in the north with Israel as well. There's obviously been the Yemen stuff. I don't know if you've seen the Yemen stuff. No, so Houthi, which are again another group, they're in very harsh support of Palestine. and they were
Right.
attacking any ships that went through this section, which is the Sinai. Let me see if I can pull up Sinai. Is it the Sinai? Yeah, no, I'm completely lying. It's the Red Sea.
I think I was just looking at a photo a
This
minute ago
here.
as well.
So this region here.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So for anyone at home, if you just look up the Red Sea, the southern part of the Red Sea, there's a small strait in the Gulf of Aden. So ships, obviously from all over the world, all over here, go
Hmm.
through here, up through the Suez, and then into Europe. How a lot
Hmm.
of trade gets into, like, especially in here, right? Yemen is one half of this strait. Now, the Houthi, I believe, is how you're meant to say it. I'm not sure, but they're a group that exist in southern Yemen, and they've been attacking any ship that comes through that is in support of Israel.
Mm.
Um, the British and U.S. Navy have been airstriking in Yemen in response to this and been apparently targeting Houthi forces. However, Yemen officially said that the damage caused by the British and the US governments is unacceptable and is actually mobilizing their official army practically in support of the Houthi movement.
Wow.
So Yemen are like very much like, you can't do this. You can't just missile strike into our country
Yeah, right.
because your Amazon package is late.
Yeah, I was gonna say because some students are acting out.
Yeah,
You know.
you can't do that.
Mm.
So the Yemen government is like very much like, you can't do that, and so they're mobilizing in an attempt to dissuade that from happening again.
Right.
Um, so there's a lot of conflict in this region, all based around really the Israeli illegal invasion of the Gaza Strip. Now, should an entire 2.3 million people be punished for the acts of thousands of militants who are...
Hmm.
Yes, the attack was awful on Israel. Innocent people died. However, knowing the context you do now, Jack, do you sort of understand why people in Gaza feel they need to do that?
Oh, I will have been kind of put on the spot here to present my opinions right now. No, I understand. I think it's like it makes a lot more sense now that I'm like, okay, I get why they're doing this.
Mm,
Obviously, what they are doing is not great, but now I know why they're doing it,
yeah,
which is the whole reason that I wanted to be doing the podcast. Was I literally said it in the first episode, was I wanted to know why people did a bad thing and not just, oh, because they're a bad person.
yeah.
Like I want to know why they did something that they did.
Um, yeah, 60 years of occupation under a state that forced them to be displaced in the first place, that was written up
Hmm.
not even by that state or Palestine, but by the British and then by the UN. So awful occupation of their land.
Yeah,
And then the follow up occupation of Gaza and the West Bank for years and years and years, like decades again. And
yeah,
then they were finally, quote unquote, released, however, then put under any stranglehold if they even tried to breathe in a different direction.
yeah.
So they're still occupied. They always have been. It's seen by a lot of people, and I do agree with it. It's a freedom movement more than anything.
Hmm.
Um, was the shooting of people in their homes necessary? No,
Hmm.
no. However, was the response for 26,000 people to be killed in Gaza by Israeli missile strikes? Probably not. Um,
It just seems like, unfortunately, the only it feels like from what I'm seeing is like the only way that they're getting their reaction is through violence, but their violence is just causing even more violence.
it's
So
the Hamas attack on Israel was an attack that was brought around by the boiling of tensions for decades
yeah,
up until an explosive point. Hamas, or Gaza in general, Palestine in general, has not been heard for decades.
mm,
No one's done anything. It took like 30 years for the UN to step in and like get a peace deal with Palestine and Egypt and Israel.
Yeah,
Israel
right.
occupied land militarily for years and years and years until the UN finally stepped in and did something.
Hmm.
The West Bank has been occupied still. The Golan Heights have been occupied still by a state that yes, in these circumstances was quote unquote defending itself, but it was defending itself from people who owned the land before they did, who existed before this state was created by invaders, by foreign invaders. The state of Jerusalem, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, existed for a long time, way back in the medieval age. It was
Mhm.
partially Jewish and largely Catholic. Um, the creation of a Jewish state was a big thing for the UN at the time, and it's really caused a lot of damage to the people in the region that it lives in. To put it in perspective, the region of Gaza, the Gaza Strip, is the most densely populated region on Earth per size to people.
Oh shit.
2.3 million people live in this region, and
Yeah.
all
Wow.
of them have been displaced. That's a war crime.
Mm.
It's a war crime to displace more than like 1 million people in a conflict zone, I believe. Touch wood. I know it's a war crime to displace less people than what they've currently displaced. It's
Yeah,
also
right.
a war crime to missile strike hospitals, which they've done.
Mhm.
All hospitals in Gaza have been struck once, or have been surrounded, have been starved out. The Israeli military forces have used the excuse that it's to kill Hamas, to defeat Hamas.
Mm.
How are you going to defeat a government without destroying the government?
Yeah.
You know, that their job, they want to remove Palestine from existence. That's what they're going to do. Um,
And
they
is
are.
that why people have been comparing it to a genocide?
It is a genocide.
Okay.
They
Well,
are.
I was going to say, like, what I've heard is the word genocide
Yeah.
being thrown around a lot, and I didn't want to be like,
They are. They
oh, so
are
it's a definite genocide because
the.
I don't
There are
understand that.
sections and elements of the Israeli government that have called people in Gaza animals, that have said
Mm.
they are less than human, that have said that they don't deserve to live in the regions they do, and that they don't deserve to live. Now, I'm going to make a comparison here, and I understand if it's going to upset people, but there was a certain government that said that about Jewish people in the 40s, that said the exact same things and did atrocious things to them.
Yeah, right.
That same group of people, who, at least their representatives in the UN, are attempting to guilt trip the UN into saying it's okay. And are using their history, they are weaponizing their history to try to make people forget about what they're currently doing and make people feel bad about what happened to them. That
Mm.
also is emphasized massively in things like their teaching and their systematic government-based brainwashing of their youth. Because their youth, many of the Israeli youth, and there are videos of it, you can easily find them. Many Israeli youth believe that Palestine shouldn't exist and that the Palestinian people are worth more than nothing. They think they are animals, they think they are less than human. And they were taught that by their government. They are told that by their elders, by their teachers.
Mhm.
The same exact same thing that the Hitler Youth were taught in Germany in 1930s and 1940s. It's an awful weaponization of your past to then degrade and shrink a human being's life into being worth nothing, so that you feel okay when you systematically attempt to kill thousands of them, including children, women, the murdering of innocent people, the destruction of sacred cultural places, of hospitals, of schools, of graveyards that have existed for hundreds of years. The IDF don't care.
Mm.
They're storming the most densely populated place on the planet, and they're hitting it with missile strikes. They are targeting civilian infrastructure, and that's not a lie. The videos of the first few days where the missile strikes were coming in, they're taking down whole apartment buildings. There's hundreds of rooms in these apartment buildings, and they're bringing down all of them with missile strikes. There is footage of people trying to drive away and tanks just blowing them up. You know, that there was a news story yesterday that I read from a man who's been in all sorts of conflicts, especially in places like Central Africa. He went to the Ukraine. He was in Chechnya when the Russians invaded that. He's seen all these conflicts, right? And he said, never have I reported on a conflict where people lure children to them like animals just so they can shoot them in a more open area. That is fucking awful. And no act committed by these people would ever warrant the response that they've received. And it would be the same if it was a Buddhist nation attacking a Hindi one. If it was a British army invading, I don't know, Australia. If it was Russia invading fucking China. I don't care who's on either side, right? Forget that right now. The things that are happening in Gaza, forgetting culture and religion and who's on both sides, are awful. Fact, right? Fact. That is fact. What is happening is awful. And it's not okay. They are committing war crimes. They are breaking the Geneva Convention. By the way, that was made to protect. That was made in response to what happened to the Jewish people after World War II. The Geneva Convention was made, and altered and added to massively because of that, and they are breaking that themselves. And then they have the balls to go into a UN summit wearing fucking Israeli stars that were used to identify them during the Holocaust. Are you kidding me? The weaponization of your past does not forgive what you are currently doing. These people existed in this space before your state was put there. These people are still existing in your space while your state was put there. Yes, they are pushing back on you. But if you surround them with walls, don't let them eat food or drink or have trade come in, or if you strangle them if they vote in people democratically that you don't like, that of course they're going to push back. Of course they are. Like, have you seen? I don't know if I've shown you pictures of the Israeli Gaza border security. It's crazy. It's like they've got fucking like machine guns on turrets, dude. Where is it? Shit like this. A 65 long kilometer giant fucking wall all around Gaza like this, yeah? So you can't leave. The only way out is through Egypt, right? But you can't really even go in because Egypt have to be like, they have to keep as best, what's the word? Relations with their neighbors as possible.
Yeah, right.
And so it's very dangerous for like anyone to try and
because I'm guessing if Egypt were letting Palestinian people get out, then Israel would be pissed off.
Not super happy, yeah. Many of the displaced people from Palestine are going into Egypt already. So that's kind of where a lot of them have come from. That's where a lot of the UN supply like deliveries have come from too. It's from Egypt. They haven't really been able to go through Israel for obvious reasons. It is so upsetting to me that it's so hard to explain because it sounds awful, right? Because you're like, I'm not denying that the Holocaust happened. Of course not. Of course it did. It was an atrocious. It was the darkest period of human history we've ever experienced. I can confidently say that. It's awful. Absolutely fucking awful. Right? The systematic destruction of any culture, any people, for no reason, even for a reason, it shouldn't happen. It's awful, right? Very similar to what you see with the Turkish and the Armenian people. They systematically destroyed these people for no reason, just because they exist.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing that again, but now it's being perpetrated by someone who's faced that problem. People are scared to talk about it because it's like, oh, they've gone through a tough time. Let's let them have Gaza and the 2.3 million people they're displacing. No, you don't do that. You don't do that. It's awful. 26,000 people have died. Civilians have died. 26,000 people. That includes 83 journalists, by the way, as well as 136 UN support workers. Those are people who have gone in to try and make sure that people are not dying in the street, bleeding out in hospitals because all their fucking doctors are dying. That doesn't include the 65,000 people wounded. 65,000 people. 10,000 children have died in Israel, in Gaza. 10,000 children. You cannot use the excuse that you are going after Hamas and then kill 10,000 children. Explain to me where those children are that Hamas are, because they're not. They're in school, they're in their homes, they are in hospitals, and these are the places that they are targeting.
Yeah.
It is an awful, disgusting use of force. It is a complete negligence of life, and it is a very obvious showing that the Israeli government, not the Jewish people, the Israeli government, do not give a flying fuck about what they're doing. They don't give a shit. They don't think the Palestinian people should exist, and that has been reflected by the comments made by people in their government. And it's awful. It is disgusting. And the fact that because it's coming from this state, it is so difficult to talk about, should not be difficult to talk about. They are committing war crimes, they're doing awful things, they are saying awful things, and the facts are being shown. There was a recent thing in New York. For some reason, there were tunnels underneath a synagogue. Very strange situation.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Tunnels under a synagogue. Do you know what the police did? They went into those tunnels, and they arrested a couple of hundred people in those tunnels, and then removed them. That's how easy it is. You do not... The US government didn't need to drop 10,000 bombs on this synagogue for them to get into the tunnels underneath.
Yeah.
You go in and you clear the tunnels. You do not drop bombs on the civilian infrastructure above it. It is the largest amount of ordnance dropped on a region in my lifetime. It is awful. And it's been 3 months. It is insanity. And the fact that it is the most densely populated region on the planet, they are going to... If they are dropping large explosive ordnance into these regions, of course they're going to hit civilians, and they know they are. Their ground forces are killing civilians, not even just their airstrikes. Their ground forces are luring children into places and shooting them. The ground forces are attacking hospitals and killing people. Do you know what the president of Israel said when Hamas asked for a ceasefire and they will release all the hostages? All of the Israeli hostages, they'll release them all, right? Do you know what Israel said? No. Israel don't give a fuck about those hostages. It was an excuse to go in and do what they're doing. They don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. And an immediate ceasefire is what's necessary. Otherwise, it will be more life, it will be more death, and it will be a consistent occupation of these people who should not be occupied. They should have their own country and their own land back and their own national identity, without living in complete fear and under the chokehold of another country. It doesn't matter what country that is, whether it's Egypt, Israel, it could be the UK, it could be anyone in the UN, the US, it doesn't matter. These people deserve to have a home that they can go to and a school they can go to. They should deserve to have a hospital they can feel safe in, and not every single day existing that they're going to be bombed, killed, shot for existing. A child was shot in the neck for going to the bathroom yesterday.
Mm.
Shot in the neck for going to the bathroom. She went there with her aunt. Her aunt was shot in the face and killed instantly, and the child was shot in the neck because they left the hospital to go to the bathroom. Because the bathrooms in the hospitals don't exist anymore because they've either been bombed out or the water, electricity, and power have been cut off, which, by the way, is also a breach of human rights because human rights say that people should always have access to water and a home and food. And the Israeli government have cut all three of those off from the Gaza Strip. They are committing crimes against humanitarian rights, crimes against war crimes, and they are breaking the Geneva Convention. All so that they can occupy this funny little strip of land because they don't give a flying fuck about the people that live there, and they believe that they should own it. It is imperialism. It is atrocious use of force, and it is being looked over because the Australian, United States, and UK governments all fund the military of Israel. So it would be an awful idea to not allow them to invade this, because how are we going to make money on it?
Mm.
It's terrible. It is awful. And I cannot express how upset it makes me. I was at the Invasion Day rally recently. And I took some very, very powerful images, and I listened to many of the speeches, and a lot of the chants were always was, always will be, right? Which is the chant for the Indigenous Australian existence of this country, which it is. And then the following chant was from the river to the sea, which is the Palestinian chant. For the existence of an independent, non-invaded, non-occupied Palestinian state. And I saw just as many Palestinian flags there as I did see indigenous people flags. It was very powerful. It was very strong. And it really shows that people care around this world about what's going on there. And when you read into it and you look about it and you talk about it, it's really difficult not to get really fucking angry and really sad. Because I can't even picture 10,000 children, let alone the 10,000 children that are dead, not including the roughly 20 to 30,000 that are missing limbs, that are never going to be able to speak again, that are never going to be able to live a normal life. You know, none of these people are going to be able to live a normal life because they exist in a constant state of occupation, war, and frankly, just pure imperialism. And we are past the time, and that's okay. And it's difficult for me to talk about this without getting very emotional. I get very, very upset. And it's just not fair on the people in there.
Well, yeah, even when we were talking about it the day of the war that is happening now, because you were explaining it to me, like what was going on at the current time, in October, and even then you being so passionate about like it, just expressing like how you feel about it, and not even just like your personal opinions, but like what is happening and why it is so like such a bad thing to be happening. It was very eye-opening.
It's difficult when you watch videos and you read news stories and you see these people reporting in camp areas, in refugee areas, in hospitals and in schools where there are people dying all around them. All you hear is people shouting and screaming and crying, and there's children who have been killed or injured, or you know, elders, men, women, it doesn't matter. There's people dying everywhere in these regions that they were told they could leave to and evacuate to, where they'd be okay. Where these regions like hospitals and schools that are protected by humanitarian rights, by the Geneva Convention, by the war crimes like committee and stuff, it doesn't matter because there's nowhere safe, and that's the problem. That's the problem with this conflict. There's nowhere to go. Where did 2.3 million people go? They are on one side Well, on 3 of their sides, they're blocked off by borders, massive borders that they can't cross. And on the other side, there's the ocean. They have
Yeah.
nowhere to go. They are trapped. And so they're stuck between an invading army from in front of them. Behind them is the ocean, and then missiles from above. There's nowhere to go. It's awful. They're trapped in this hellscape that they didn't create. You know, it was
Unfortunately,
created
it's
by
like
other people.
the word trapped almost like doesn't emphasize it enough. It's like there is no word to really like explain it, because trapped just almost like doesn't feel like enough.
Yeah. It's I don't know. That was anyway. I can't rant on it longer because I'll just get really upset.
And
It's
it'll be 2 hours long.
oh, I'm happy to chat for 2 hours long about how angry I am about this topic, man. Do you have any questions or thoughts on it? Because I know it's full on. I know I've rambled about it, and I don't want you to share your thoughts and feel like that they won't be heard and understood. If you have
No,
different opinions, then that's completely also okay.
My whole thoughts is like I don't want to upset people by being like ignorant, I guess. Like this is the first time that I've learned about anything to do with Israel, Palestine, stuff like that. So I don't want to just, I don't want to like almost Chinese whispers it, where like you have said something to me and then I go and say something that I have misinterpreted, and either, cause myself like some sort of problems or cause you problems. It's not really what I want to do. I want to be able to like I mean, like you've said, I want to be like, for the people that are listening, where you teach what you can and you also like advise that people do their own research on it as well. So it's like it's almost like a stepping stone into people doing their own research about the thing. So it's just very good that you were able to at least teach me about the historical part of it, with the facts of what I've seen. Like you've literally been showing me the facts and stuff like that while we've been talking about it. So it's, regardless of like how your opinions or what my opinions are on what's going on currently, I think it's good that you were able to show me all of the stuff before that so I can form my own opinions.
Yeah.
Which is the whole point of the podcast, really, is to be able to have your own opinions about the world, political views, stuff like that, without them being skewed or influenced by you or myself. So
yeah, exactly, and I'm glad you see it that way. It's obviously, I've shared my own opinions on this. I don't normally share my opinions, especially not as passionately as I have today.
I think the last time you shared like a passionate opinion or view was when you were pissed off about how the Australian Prime Minister spent $7 billion or whatever on submarines, and that compared to something like this, a bit less of an issue. Like, I would say that this is something that I'm sure that you would be a lot more passionate about, and have a lot more, passionate opinion, I guess. No, I think regardless of what you have said right now, it's good that you have mentioned at almost like a cutoff, however many minutes in, like the 50-minute mark of like, we are now going into like the current events, how we feel about them and stuff like that. So then the people that don't want to hear about our opinions, I guess, can be like, okay, this is the whole history of why this stuff is happening now. And they can, like you said, they can click off, they can listen to another episode, whatever, but they at least have that knowledge, like they've at least been told what has happened leading up to it. So I think that's just a good spot to be able to like cut it off and then be like, now we're going to talk about what's going on currently. And obviously like your opinion is going to be shared, because you can't just be like, yeah, this happened, or this is currently happening and this is currently happening, and that's all I'm going to give you. Like you have to at least say how you feel about it when you're currently talking about it, especially
I
because this is our podcast. Like,
yeah,
I was going to say
exactly.
journalists and stuff like that are obviously going to be like not adding their own opinion if they're,
Sometimes it depends.
yeah,
It depends on the
sometimes.
journalist, I think, and
Sometimes,
the
and I
people they
guess
work for.
sometimes, yeah, I was going to say it depends on uh, how controversial they're going to be about it. But
Exactly.
no,
Um,
it's been a good episode, I think.
I think so. And if anyone has differing opinions or feels differently, I'd love to know why. I'd love to know how you feel about it. I understand a lot of people see it as like it was a terrorist attack in response to that. But I think
Absolutely,
if
yeah.
you really I would really advise you to do some proper reading into um the response that's been taken
Hmm.
and how possibly, oh, this is a bit of a yikes thing to put at the end of the podcast, but yeah, apparently, well, I say that when the initial attack happened from Hamas into Israel through the
Hmm.
border, Israeli, US, and UK intelligence agencies apparently knew nothing about it, which seems extraordinarily unlikely. However, seeing that as then like a cause for war, it definitely would be. So
Mm.
form your opinion on that if you want to. Definitely do your own reading into it. As I've always said in every podcast we've done, if you ever want more information on it or you don't agree with what we've said, feel free to do your own research into it. Make sure you read into it yourself, look it up yourself if you're interested in it at all. Obviously, I spoke very strongly about my opinions of this podcast. If that's not something you guys like, let me know. Or if it is something you like, let me know as well. Because
Mm.
I'm a man full of opinions. So I am human. So um, I'm only I so like so yeah, do your research. I hope you guys really enjoyed. If you did, make sure you do 5 stars on Spotify if it's the first time listening, as always. Otherwise, if you're on YouTube, make sure you like,
I hope this is
sub,
not
and
someone's
stuff.
first time listening.
If this was your
I
first
hope
time
their
listening,
first
it's
time listening
pretty
was,
full on.
yeah, I was going to say, they're not always like this. If you are still listening to this point, this was your first time listening, please listen to the other episodes. They are not this full on, they are not this serious. A lot more joking, a lot more messing around, and a lot more just like fun historical things that we
Mm.
learn about. Yeah, it's not always this serious, it's not always this dark.
I just really wanted to talk about this with you. I think it would
Absolutely, yeah.
be interesting because a lot of people see what happened recently and that's it. You know, not a lot of people know why these states exist, how
Hmm.
long they've been here, why the conflicts in the past have happened, and why they're happening now. I thought it'd be really interesting to at least make sure the viewers and you and I did a bit of reading too. You know, we've all learned from this, so I think it's
Yeah.
interesting to form your own opinion from that and to really see how the past really affects now because it always does. It always does. So
Mm.
yeah. Thank you everyone for listening. We love you all.
John, where can the people find you?
Where can they find me? They can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/. I don't know what was it?
John Real Talk,
John
I
Real
think.
Talk. That's it. I
That's
forgot.
how often John uses it.
I
He doesn't even know his
forgot.
own
I
Instagram handle,
sometimes look.
Twitter handle.
I forgot. Yeah.
I
So
forgot.
you can reach me there, and you can check at twitter.com/AirJack.
Hmm.
Nice. Well, there you go.
On everything. If you want to hear
Everything.
me make more jokes and not talk about serious shit,
He
I
is
do shit on
funny.
YouTube. I shit post on Twitter occasionally. I stream on Twitch occasionally.
He does that
So yeah,
too.
I do
All right,
all of it.
kings, queens, everything outside and in between.
Royalty.
We love you guys.
Thank you
And
so much.
thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.
Kisses.
Kisses.